Welcome to the latest episode of Husbandry, a place where we talk about an institution that's explained so black and white, but we learn how to live it in color. And I have a special guest with me today, the classy, sophisticated, intellectual, Jay Delaney. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How you doing, sir?
Man, I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Let me give you a little breakdown of the podcast. You know, in this season, we're interviewing men who have been married over 2 decades. And the reason we're doing that, I would talk to a lot of friends or brothers who would come up to me and they'll ask me stuff about marriage. And I'm like, listen, bro, I've only been married 10 years, right? Like, I know a little bit, but I don't know a lot. And I realized that there was a gap in between some of newly married men, right? Or men who are probably at places of challenges in their marriage, and those men who have been through the challenges or have good marriages. And I said, man, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this. And I started writing men down that I knew have been married more than 2 decades. And you made the list. You made the list. So tell us, how long have you been married?
My wife and I are in the midst of our 25th year. So we'll mark 25 in September of this year.
A quarter century.
A quarter century.
If you can describe your marriage in one sentence, what would it be?
Probably something like it is the sum total of many years of learning how to work together, how to row in the same direction, and how to stand back to back, fighting off all comers that would come for our relationship.
Man, that's a I can tell you're a writer, Doc. That was good. Rowing in the same direction. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why that's important in marriage. Why you and your wife have continuously strived to learn that and do that. Explain that concept of rowing in the same direction to us.
So I kind of visualize like a canoe, and if you've ever been in a canoe, 2 people, one in front of the other, and you're trying to go from A to B. If I'm in the front of the canoe and I'm rowing this way, and my wife is in the back of the canoe and she's rowing in the opposite direction, figuring she's going straight, we're rowing in opposite directions and the boat goes nowhere. If we're both rowing on the left side, we're going to go in circles. Same thing on the right side. But rowing in the same direction at the same time and appropriately on the sides is what's going to get us from where we started to where we're trying to get to. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So let's talk about that in context. I want to get back to that. But tell me the love story. What's you and your wife's love story? How did you fall in love? How'd you stay in love trying to keep this canoe straight, going from here to there? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the middle part is there were minutes where we were not going straight, as would be the case probably with everyone at some point. But we were introduced by a mutual friend. Neither one of us was really interested in being introduced to somebody at that point. And we both recognized pretty early on that there was an age difference. And so we were pretty skeptical.
Yeah. How many years?
13.
13 years.
And we were skeptical in different
and you're
directions.
older. We don't want
I'm the older.
Where we don't want people thinking that your wife is a cougar or anything like that. Okay.
No,
you
sir.
were older.
I do have to go home tonight. But it was, for me, I believe what really got me to get beyond it, because initially I was thinking, okay, what is going to be on this young girl's mind? What are we going to be able to talk about? Because we grew up in different eras. You know, I graduated high school, excuse me. And I get a chuckle out of this because folks look at me funny when I say it. when I was graduating high school, she was in kindergarten.
Wow.
So we grew up in different eras.
Jeez, that's crazy. Yeah.
But I didn't know her at the time. Let's get that straight.
That's right.
We lived in different parts of the country. So
yeah.
Nothing crazy was going on. But the way I came to see it and view it was, if she had grown up in another part of the world in a totally different culture, we would have had different upbringings. We would have had different music. We would have had different books. We would have had different, all kinds of inputs into our lives would have been different. Would that have been a deal killer, deal breaker? And the answer was no, it would not have. Very similar concept. I grew up listening to music of my era. That probably bothers her more now because I'm always saying, hey, listen to that. That was so-and-so.
Yeah.
But she grew up listening to music in her era. Very different musical eras. But I think we've both come to have an appreciation over the decades of each other's upbringing eras. And so we've learned how to mesh all of that together. I was not raised anywhere near a church. And she was born in a pew, in my opinion. And so very different upbringings that way. But we were able to, we through a lot of that intentional, hard work from the very beginning, have been able to get to the place where we're rowing in the same direction. Being very intentional about treating each other well, just in the day-to-day. This might sound cliche or even cornball to maybe some of the more modern, younger crowd or listenership, viewership, but stuff like please and thank you.
Yeah.
In the daily. In the just run-of-the-mill stuff.
That goes a long way. My wife and I talk about that all the time. When we ask one another for something, saying please and thank you just reminds the person that you don't take them for granted or what they're doing. But keep going. Yes, that means a lot.
My wife does most of the cooking in the house. She won't let me do it. It's her kitchen, she said. She said that, not me. But thanking her for cooking that day, for making dinner that day. Really simple, daily, day in and day out stuff is what, in my view, gets you to that place of rowing in the same direction at the same time over a long period of time.
So being grateful for one another. Now, I know it's your story and you know it like the back of your hand. You skipped a couple chapters on us, right? You went from the blind date to saying thank you and please every day, right? Or the introduction. So you meet, you get introduced to one another. The age gap is in question.
Yeah.
You get over that being an issue. What happens after that?
So it indeed was a blind date, and all kinds of stories there. But we talked for the first week on the phone before we ever met each other, and I was intentional about feeling her out. I wanted to know where her head was, and it's probably all ego on my part at the time. Because I also, at the same time, I met her 3 weeks after joining the church.
Right.
I'd mentioned I'd never been in the church.
Right.
And she'd been there her whole life. So we both had these perspectives on the other. But we spent a lot of time together in that first month or so. We were real intentional because we both knew a lot of people where we lived. We dated a lot in the first 30, 45 days. We went out a lot, but we went out places where we weren't going to run into people. We went from Delaware to Pennsylvania to go out a lot so that we could spend time getting to know each other without having to say hello to everybody we saw because we knew so many people.
Right.
And that was invaluable on the front end. And within probably that first couple of months, it was like, this feels real good. I went over to her house one Saturday afternoon, her apartment, and she opens the door, and on the television, she's watching the Little League World Series.
Yeah.
I'm a sports fan, and I see that on her TV, and I'm like, I think I love this woman. This was about a month in.
That's a clip right there. The Little League World Series made us fall in love. That's it right there.
And she was watching it on purpose.
Right.
So I was immediately, I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. And within a few months, we both were really recognizing that it had the potential to be something real special. It had to, we called it, I still remember this, possibility of permanence. Probably 3-4 months in. And we dated for 2 years and were married. We started dating in August and we were married September 2 years later.
So let's talk about this a little bit because I think you just gave an amazing tip to individuals, to men who may be dating right now and they're ready to get married. But the woman that they're dating, they run in the same circles. And at times it's good to date in front of the people you run in the same circles with. And at times it's good to date away. So you can actually get to know the individual and not how everybody else has experienced them. And you can live up to your own expectations. How would you encourage a young man to go about that now? Would you encourage him to always date in the midst of people they know? Or would you say you need to pull away for a little bit so you can really get to know this person or this individual for yourself? What would you say now?
I absolutely recommend that still. In the early going of the relationship, do your best to spend quality, good time with that person outside the view of everybody, your friends. We didn't even tell the guy that introduced us that we were dating in those first 30, 45 days.
Right.
He kept asking both of us, and neither one of us would confirm or deny that we were. But I absolutely encourage that so that you can get to know, you can get some, I don't want to say intimate knowledge and be misinterpreted, but you can get some intimate understanding of that person without friends putting their 2 cents in on either side, without mom and them putting their 2 cents into the mix, with no one else's input beyond what you and the other person are giving each other in that early going, so that you can really get a good sense of whether it's something that needs to even needs to continue down the road. You might determine in that early going that I'm not really feeling this. I'm not really feeling her. After having gotten to know her better,
right?
She's an awesome person, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be this.
Yeah, I told my wife when I was dating her, I said, my goal is to get to know you. And if we don't work out, I want you to be able to tell the next guy, he's one of the best guys I ever met in my life. We just weren't right for one another. Right?
That's
because
good.
I always, we just trying this out. Right? I was through with dating just to date.
Yep.
I was ready to get married. But I also knew that I may get into a situation where she was just like, nah, no, not my type. Or I was just like, nah, no, not my type. And then we would just walk away from there and it'll be cool. We both go on our journey.
Yep.
But it didn't happen that way because we're 11 years in and we are still moving. Tell me this, every guest that I've had on this show thus far, their marriage carries like this, their own personal theme. And it seems from me believing I know a good part of your story that you and your wife's theme is this idea of meshing it all together. Because if I'm not mistaken, when you got married, you also entered into a blended family.
Yes.
Tell us about that. So there are a couple of things we're meshing together. We're meshing together different cultures, different life circumstances, ages, and then blended family. How was that on your marriage going into it, knowing that you're not going into a marriage where it's just you two and you're then building out, but you already have family structures formed around you and you need to put this all together?
So in our situation, I would say we were a little naive about it. We kind of figured it was going to go a lot smoother than it did. It did not. There was a lot of challenge. 1 year after we got married, our income was a third of what we were making the day we got married.
Wow.
Just due to circumstances and stuff happening.
Right.
So that immediately put a lot of pressure on. My sense of it has always been we were being taught the difference between want and need in that season, because our coming together was a good thing for us being able to do some things as a newly married couple. But that wasn't the lesson that was to be learned in those moments. We needed to know how to differentiate between wants and needs. And that can be a harsh lesson at times, but it was a very early on lesson. And that made its way into some of the dynamics of the blended family. In fact, eventually we got to a place where we had to do some research and studying of our own. And we came to the conclusion, if you will, that we much prefer the notion of it being a bonded family rather than a blended family.
Yeah.
A bonded family is put together with something that will withstand the pressures. The bonding agent is what will withstand the pressures that could pull the marriage apart. Here's something real nerdy for you. Geckos. Everybody knows geckos. Everybody's seen those commercials.
That's right.
Geckos are amazing. They can hold some incredible amount of pounds of pressure above their own weight before their grip will let go of what they're on, even if it's glass. There's some sort of a process that happens when a gecko puts their little toes on a surface that essentially bonds them to that surface. It's some sort of an electrochemical process that goes on. I told you it was geeky.
Yeah.
But that's what allows them, some of the studies that they've done with it is they'll tie a little weight to the tail and see how much more weight they can keep putting on before that gecko starts to slide down the side of that terrarium. And they figured out, because it's not suction, it's not a suction thing, it's not, they don't have sticky little feet. There's something going on at for lack of a better term, an atomic level that bonds them to that glass. And so if we can latch on to some kind of a bonding agent that maybe we can't even see, that can be the center of what pulls us together as that family. If we can be that bonded family, you can always not unseparate. I said that totally wrong. You can always separate things that are blended together.
Right.
You can always pull the chemicals apart, the substances apart, and make them individualized substances again. But something that's bonded at an atomic level is something that's going to stay. And we kind of made the decision that was what our aim was for our family, that we were going to be this bonded unit, that we weren't going to allow all those forces that can come into play in a family that's brought together. We have never been step anything in our house.
Wow. So you never even used that terminology, stepmom, stepdad, step this.
The children call my wife mom.
Yeah.
Because the children that came into the marriage were mine. Yeah. And she's mom.
Yeah.
And do anything for them. Always has been that way. So I probably skipped over some stuff again.
No, that's good. Our journeys usually lay out our curriculums for love, right? We learn to love along the journey. Things happen and we respond to them. How did your situations up front, whether it be the finances or the bonded family, how did those teach you how to love one another? How did those lead you to build the love that you have now?
They brought home the lesson that love is a decision. We need to decide. It almost sounds cliche at this point, but we need to decide every day, yeah, I'm going to love her no matter what we have to go through today.
That's a word.
We're right very different people.
Yeah.
I tend to be more even keel. She's much more the not volatile. She's going to kill me for that. Much more the vibrant, passionate person. Even though she's an introvert by nature, when she's on something, she's on it, and she's going to advocate for it, and she gets into it. She gets all the body motion in her conversation and the hands and the whole nine. But I tend to be much more even keel with things typically. And that's just kind of the beginning of the ways in which we're just really different people. And so, yeah, there continue to be things about each other where we're like, really?
Yeah.
Both of us doing that.
Right.
The blessed part of it is at this point, though, is we are 25 years in, we can chuckle about that stuff. Whereas 20 years ago, it might have ended in some deep conversation.
Yeah, there you go.
Over some really little thing at the end of the day. So yeah.
Talk about this decision, making this decision every day. That struck me. I was watching a movie recently. It's actually an animated movie done by one of my favorite directors and producers and writers, Kenya Barris. He's one of my favorite creatives to watch. And he does this movie with Kid Cudi. It's called Intergalactic. And there was a line in there that like jumped out of the TV for me. And the line says, "It's easy to fall in love on accident, but it gets real when you have to do it on purpose." I said, wow. That just hit me in my chest, because it is easy to fall in love. Oh, I met a girl, I met a guy, and oh my God, I love them. But when you have to do it on purpose day by day, talk about this mindset of daily making a decision to love an individual, and then talk about fighting on the days where you might not feel like it or you're questioning. And I'm not saying you've had any of those days. I don't know. Right. But I know that there's somebody who is going to watch this and they're going to say, yeah, I got to make the decision. But some mornings I get up and I don't feel like I want to make that decision. I want to actually make the opposite decision. Tell us about why this decision process on a daily basis is so important.
I feel it's important because, and I guess from the perspective of, I have to recognize that my wife is no more perfect than me. And truth be told, both of us are so far from perfect, as are we all, that at the end of the day, it's humorous how far we are from perfect.
Right.
Therefore, I don't have a lot of ground to stand on to say that, this imperfect woman is really stepping in it today. I'm done. Because tomorrow it's probably going to be me stepping in it and she's looking at me.
Yeah.
Because we are equally human, equally capable of error, equally capable of frequent error. And if I can walk into it assuming those types of things, and knowing that I don't have a leg to stand on to be able to be able to come at her neck about about things that I look and I'm like, really, it gets me to the place of the self-talk of, I'm going to love her today, whatever comes through, because she had to love me yesterday in my foolishness. And this was what we promised each other when we were young and in love, and standing in front of the preacher and God and made those promises. And so it's kind of like the sum total of all of these things that come together to try to create a space, an environment where we can do these things. We often talk about our home, and even on a more micro level, our relationship being safe space to be able to come as we are when something's going on in our day. We can come in that space and fuss and complain about whoever for whatever, even though we know we need to go out the door with a corrected attitude, an adjusted attitude for wherever it is we have to go. If we have to go to a family function, if we have to go to work, if we have to go to wherever, making that the safe space to unload all of those things, for either one of us to unload all of those things, for me, and I think for us, is just really important. It creates the environment where we don't have to worry about somebody might be thinking I'm making my point too loud, or somebody might think I'm not speaking the King's English at the moment.
Yeah.
In the midst of our intense fellowship.
Right. So it's easier to love someone when I realize how hard it is to love me and how easy they've made it look.
Yes, sir.
Right?
You've hit that.
So let's talk about expectations. Because a lot of the times, when we are thinking about love, we can think about it through our own expectations. And many of us won't admit it, but many of us probably want a perfect mate because we want all our expectations met, which means that this mate would have to be perfect to do that. How do I live in the tension of having expectations and not allowing my mate to love me in any way they think they can love me instead of the way that I want to be loved, but also holding those expectations loosely so if they don't meet them, they can get another crack at it and we can try it again? How do I live, or how have you and your wife lived in that tension of, well, I'm not going to get rid of the expectations, but I understand why you didn't meet, let's try again?
So there's probably about 3 different places where I would come at that question. First is the early on pre-marriage part. One of the biggest, in my view, subjects in marriage, premarital counseling should be the idea of expectation.
Yes, Lord Jesus.
One of the worst things we can do is come into a relationship, let alone a marriage, with unspoken expectations.
Oh my gosh.
Unaddressed expectations.
Dre and them told me I had to sit still, but I'm about to jump up out of this chair. Yeah.
It's a huge deal. If I go into my marriage and I have the expectation that my wife is going to cook every night, and she has the expectation that I'm going to be bringing home takeout every night, we never had this conversation, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Because that's a foundational issue. We got to eat every day.
Right.
And we're already at odds about how we're going to eat every day.
Right.
Because we never had the conversations on the front end.
Yes.
About about how we were going to eat every night. And so that's a huge, huge piece of it, is the early part. And my age is going to show right now because I'm trying to remember
the
my
middle
other
part.
2 points. But we went through some of that early, and had to get to the place of being intentional about expectations. We talk about all kinds of stuff. We talk about as much of everything as we can now. She's literally the first person I want to call when something happens or when something crosses my mind. I send her 10 rando emails every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just some crazy thing. And she'll send me back the gas face. Like, did you really just send me that?
Y'all got that email love, huh?
But just being dealing, I just spoke about the whole issue of the safe space. The safe space allows the conversation about expectations to continue down the road and throughout the years, so that you know where each other are with stuff on an ongoing basis.
Do you still voice your expectations on a regular basis to one another? This is what I really need from you. And she says, this is, how do you do that?
Just like that.
Yeah.
We might wind up in the same space. Try not to do it really like remotely or by text message or, any of the modern technology ways, but face to face, so that we can have a full conversation. Because as you know, there's so much of communication. I don't remember the percentage, but a whole lot of communication is nonverbal.
Yes.
And so getting the nonverbals in person can help in those conversations, so that we don't miss some aspect of what needs to be shared in the moment. Sometimes the face will say something that the mouth didn't say, and we need to address. So what's that look?
Right.
You look like you're not really feeling the fullness of this.
Yeah.
And so we try to do those conversations that can be really, they don't have to be elaborate. They don't have to be long or, all that kind of stuff. If you can get to whatever that particular issue is in the moment that needs to be put out there, that expectation, whoever it is, we can talk about it. And I believe both of us are quick to recognize when we messed up. And again, being intentional in the communication, we came away a long time ago from "I'm sorry" to seeking forgiveness, asking forgiveness. I'm sorry, and this is for the fellas. I'm sorry. Nah, you've removed the whole issue of her being able to be given the opportunity to forgive, which is huge.
Yeah.
When you just go to the "I'm sorry," because at some point the "I'm sorry" is going to become "I said I was sorry."
Right. And
that becomes a whole nother conversation.
I think that is so important when you are apologizing. And this is how we teach our children, because this is what we model. I apologize that I did this
Mhm.
and I ask for your forgiveness.
Yeah. Yep.
And depending on how your spouse processes, that forgiveness may come right in the moment where they can say, I forgive you. Or they may say, thank you for your apology. I need some time to think. Do you mind if I come back in and talk to you about that? And I'm going to get on communication in 1 second, but I have to jump right back into this. I got to warn my young and old whippersnappers about this expectation thing. My wife and I are 10 years in. We'll have our 11th wedding anniversary in March of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat down at 10 years in our marriage and said, I think we made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we got married, we were more worried about being responsible Christian men and women, or a Christian man and woman, and we overlooked or thought we could go without some things that were very important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of having that conversation up front, I knew that you didn't like this or that you didn't probably provide this. And I'm just like, you know what? Man, Jesus is everything. I can make it without that. Mm-hmm. Then you get 10 years in and you're like, oh, I didn't know how much I really need that.
Mm-hmm.
And my expectation, I trumped it at the door because I was just trying to be such a Christian.
Yeah.
Right? Or I was just trying to tell them, you know what, I'm going to love you any way you are. And then you realize that there's this big puzzle piece missing. And so if I was to advise any young man or woman when they get married, I'd say, talk about all that stuff at the door. If you need it now, you're going to need it 10 times more once you get married.
Even if you press it down.
Even if you press it down, right? You're going to fill that void. Now, if you do press it down, let's get to this next thing that we want to talk about, solving conflict. Mm-hmm. Because expectations and misexpectations come with conflict. I have a friend that tells me, well, you know, when I'm dealing with people, I don't have any expectation. I said, that's a lie, right? All of us have expectations. Even no expectation is an expectation, right? When expectations are not met, there's something inside of you that feels like you've been slighted. Mm-hmm. And that conflict arises. How have you and your wife jumped into solving that conflict in a peaceful, loving manner where you may argue or you may have a disagreement about something, but you still are on the same team? Mm-hmm. How does that work for you?
You just teed me up right there.
Yeah.
With what I wanted to touch on. So the only place where I have no expectations is with my New York Giants.
Yeah.
Just so happens that they are going to be playing my wife's Philadelphia Eagles this weekend.
Yeah.
And we've spent 25 years in that tension, surviving it because of what we're looking at starting this year, because of what we're kind of hanging our hats on starting this year. And if that's the concept of radical grace.
Yeah. Talk about that, Doc. Radical grace.
If
that just sounds hard. It just sounds like it's hard.
It's not easy.
Right.
I make no suggestion that it's easy, but it's the motto. It's our motto. Our motto is radical grace. All I have to do is think about Jesus up on a cross, dying, but speaking to those thieves. Mm-hmm. For me, that was radical grace. He's in the throes of the pivotal moment, the first pivotal moment of his ministry, and he has grace enough left to forgive, really both of them, but to speak most specifically to the one, and telling him, today you'll be with me in paradise.
Right.
That for me, that was radical grace. Because if I'm dying, I'm a human. If I'm dying, I'm gonna be like, why are you talking to me? You don't see me over here dying too?
Yeah. And you asking me for something and I'm dying. But that's a great illustration. right? Because when your expectations are met, you feel like you're the person that's dying, right? So in this whole thing, this is what you're telling me, that marriage ain't about me. And I don't like that, right? Kind of like don't like that, right? That I've jumped into this
But
union.
it's so much the truth.
But it's so much, that's the whole thing that you've been saying. Listen, you forgive because marriage ain't about you. You have this radical grace because it's not you. And you talk about Jesus being on the cross with the thieves and he's dying and crucified along with them. And he's still worried about giving them the opportunity.
Outward
facing of this grace. And with marriage being this institution that mirrors Christ in the church, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
A lot.
And he still said, if this cup can pass. So you deal with the hard, but we got to get to the nevertheless.
We're preaching up in here. I didn't ask you to come here and preach no sermon. I asked you to come here and talk about marriage. But go ahead. You're doing both at the same time.
Another one of our visuals when we teach like premarital and such, is if you can envision a male gladiator and a female gladiator standing back to back. Both of them have their weapons, whatever it is, and each of them is worried about their 180.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole objective is dealing with their 180 so that their spouse behind them doesn't have to worry about their back. If I got all this covered, I'm taking on all comers from this side, and I don't have to watch back here because I know she's back there doing the same. We got 360 degrees covered, and whoever wants some can come try if they want.
Yeah,
but they're gonna catch it,
right?
Because we are committed to being back to back and outward facing to the betterment, to the protection of the one who has no protection for what's coming this direction.
And I think that is the perfect illustration between a good marriage and a bad marriage. A bad marriage, people spend their time fighting one another. A good marriage, people spend their time fighting for one another, right? In a bad marriage, people are more face-to-face, arguing with one another. They've turned. So both of their backs are exposed, right?
And the outcome is inevitable.
And the outcome is inevitable. So let's talk about that because you're giving me so much good stuff. I don't want to keep us here for too long because we got to get you home to your bride so she don't give us a bad rating, right? What are the top 5 characteristics, in your opinion, of a good marriage?
In no particular order, I have to have communication in there. I have to have respect in there. I have to have grace in there. That's 3. What else would I put in? How could I miss? I have to put prayer in there. And I think we've talked about this before. The idea of being equally yoked, I think, is misinterpreted, maybe even mistaught. Equally yoked from a faith perspective. For me, it's being at the same level, if you will.
Right.
So we go at our faith. If both of us are on 10 for our faith, then that's equally yoked. If I'm on 10 and she's on 5, like as a general notion in life, not just like last Tuesday, but throughout time, if I'm on 10 and she's on 5 for faith, I think that's unequally yoked because she's going to get tired of me being on 10 and I'm always about it. And she could take it or leave it half the time.
Right.
Or vice versa. She
Right.
could be the one who's on 10 and I'm on 5. And so I feel like I need to put that in there from a faith perspective, because if we're both trying to walk in faith, it's a huge aspect of our lives. It's like it's the aspect of our lives, and if we're in different places with that, that can be almost like what you just mentioned. We could be clashing on something that's supposed to be that core to our existence. That, for me, that would be problematic. So I'd have to put that in the top 5 too.
Yeah. 2 more questions, and then we're going to head on out of here. And I liked how you use your Master P terminology too. About it. About it.
My son would be proud.
So often I hear people who are married or people who want to be married they say out loud, I want someone who can be my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. And I'm with that 100%. But in some marriages, we can be the best of friends and we can cease being lovers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you and your wife stay lovers and friends? Usher Ludacris little placement for y'all. Remember that? Usher Ludacris? Yeah, you remember it? Lovers and friends. I mean, you can learn from anywhere.
I don't remember.
But how...
I remember Master P, but I don't remember Ludacris.
I don't know if you've ever known that one, right, Rev? You might not have been out the streets when I was in the streets, right? But we're going to leave that alone. But lovers and friends.
Mm-hmm.
How do you and your wife make sure you cover both?
The one word I'll use is intentionality. And I'll tie that to, fellas, do not underestimate date night.
I hear that all the time. Date night.
Don't underestimate. Don't sell that short, because it's time right here. It gets to the issue of intimacy, which for the most part has nothing to do with the bedroom.
That's right. Tell them.
Intimacy has to do with, my pastor always equated it to, and you may have heard it, into me see. That space and time and moments where you share space, you share moments, and don't make date night always date night with a whole bunch of other folks. Those can be fun. You can go to the movies, you can go to the ball game, you can go bowling, you can do whatever you want to do with it. But there needs to be that time and space where date night is how y'all were on your third date.
Yeah.
Because chances are on your third date, it was just you two.
Mm-hmm.
And you were making googly eyes at each other at some bad restaurant because it didn't really matter where you were eating, as long as y'all were at this little bitty table across from each other.
Yeah.
Or if you were a real player, you were sitting side by side at that table.
Little game. I ain't never heard that before. Sitting side by side. Okay, you gotta teach me about that on the second time you come on. All right. Matter of fact, give me a little bit after we cut the cameras off. Right.
But don't not to beat a dead horse, but you cannot overestimate the importance of date night. Being intentional about things. I make a point of not forgetting different dates, like anniversary, birthday type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed at how many guys will forget their wife's birthday.
I forget my kids' birthdays sometimes, but I will not forget my wife's birthday or the anniversary.
There you go. That's
right?
Brilliant.
Forget them kids.
Exactly.
Baby, I remembered yours.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. My son asked me when he was, I don't know, maybe 15-ish, and we were a few years into the bonded family. He asked me, who do I love more, him and his sister or my wife?
Wow.
And I told him, my wife.
Mhm.
And he couldn't understand it at the time. When he was about 28, 29, he took us to dinner on our anniversary. And he said, I get it now. The marriage relationship is the one that was ordained by God, not the parent-child relationship.
Yeah.
That was established by God. And it's the fulcrum of the family. It's the cornerstone of the family, if you will, is that marriage relationship. And y'all are going to leave at some point. As much as y'all may be in my pocket right now, as much as I love y'all, et cetera, y'all are going to, the whole goal of parenting is for y'all to go.
That's right. Shoot you out there into the world.
Exactly. The goal of this relationship is for us to stay.
Mm.
And so I put more into her from that perspective. I nurture that even harder than I nurture my parent-child relationships, because at some point you're going to be in your own marriage relationship where they're nurturing you and you're nurturing them more than you are thinking about me.
Right.
So trying to explain all of that to them at the time was tough, but it became clear later on.
2 comments on my last question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for reminding me what intimacy is. And when a husband sits down at that table with his wife, he's reminding her, I see you, I'm with you, I love you, right? He's setting aside and carving that time, those consistent reminders. And then the courage it takes, especially in a bonded family, it takes courage when you and your spouse have had children to tell them your mama more important than you. But the courage it took for you to tell your son that, and he held on to it, right? And got to 28, right? So 13 years before he came back and said, oh, now I see it, right? Like that is, especially with a bonded family, that takes some courage and some sacrifice. So kudos to you there. Last question. If you could fly a banner around the world, or you could put billboards up in every city, and you can tell masses of people one message about marriage, or one warning about marriage, or one encouragement, what would it be?
I didn't originate this thought, but I subscribe to it. Marriage, the institution that was initiated by God, is for our betterment at the end. I think it was maybe Gary Chapman that spoke in the context of what if marriage was not so much for your happiness as it is for your holiness.
Oh, you better stop playing with me.
And when you stop and think about
it ain't about me. Marriage ain't about me.
When you stop and think about that, all that goes on in the context of the marriage should be making us more like Christ.
Jesus.
The grace, the intentionality, the decision to love, no matter whether my spouse might be having a bad day, cutting up, doing stuff I'm not feeling, etc. Just the agape love, if you will. Just what if that's the purpose, is to make us more like Christ, because we sit in a place in marriage of having to do all the things that he's had to do with respect to us.
Before I really let you get out of here. I'm a Baptist preacher. I say, as I close
Finna
3
close.
times, I'm finna close, right? And then the Spirit speaks to me again. Marriage is about learning. It's about studying. It's about reflecting. What are some book recommendations or scriptures that you've held on to throughout your years of marriage that have really helped you?
I don't know how old this book is, but it's real still. Love Languages. That thing is just real. Do not underestimate the reality of the differences in love languages and how they apply to people's lives. So I would absolutely recommend that one. There's one I'm forgetting. I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, that we are going to be incorporating into our own premarital counseling work. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. Sorry I even mentioned that, since I can't remember it.
No problem. When you do, send it over to us. We'll post it in the notes.
Amen.
Amen.
Couple of different places in Scripture that really hold a lot for me when I view marriage as a journey, as not a sprint, but a marathon type concept. I absolutely go to Ecclesiastes and the whole issue of there's a time for, there's a season for. Marriage is going to have all kinds of seasons. Just is.
Yeah.
As we grow and develop as human beings, as believers, etc., we're going to be in various seasons over time, and we may not always be in lockstep. So sometimes I need to be brought back to that. Colossians 3. Whatsoever you do, I think it's 23. Whatsoever you do, do it as unto the Lord.
Yeah.
That applies in our marriages, in our families. The stuff that we do, you hear brothers all the time talking about, I grind for mine. Do it like you're doing it for God, and they will be blessed.
Yeah.
And two more passages anyway. Ephesians 6, full armor. That's a daily thing, full armor of God. And then Philippians 4, 7, 8. And it just went right out of my head, just that fast. Rejoicing, and I say rejoice. The peace of God.
Yeah.
That Irene peace of God. We've talked about it. That peace that is the peace in the midst of chaos, not shalom. The shalom is where there's no trouble, no problems. But how many of us have zero problems in our lives? Raise your hand. No hands? So that peace of God, that he says passes understanding.
Yeah.
That helps me all the time in all kinds of settings and situations in family, because stuff comes along. Sometimes it's crazier than others. But to be able to kind of latch on to that in those moments, to know that God's peace is available to any and all of us when we're going through. That's something that is just really helpful for me at a personal level.
Well, Jay Delaney, thank you so much for blessing us tonight with your wisdom.
Oh man,
with your 25 years, quarter century of marriage. Man, thank you to our team here,
Absolutely.
Our production team. Listen, you're the first one that's live on video. We started this on Zoom and other streaming platforms. And then we got these two wonderful gentlemen here, John and Dre, that said, man, listen, I'll pitch in. I want to help with this. Let's take this to the next level. So you're the first one that actually got to sit in the chair.
That's pressure.
And listen, God is sovereign because you bought it tonight, brother. But thank you so much for joining us.
Me.
I know you're going to bless a lot of men out there who are in their marriages and need to strive. You've blessed me, right? Like I am learning as a husband right now, and some of the questions that I am asking and some of the places where I am, what you said was a blessing to me, right?
Praise
so
God.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We're going to have you back again.
You know, we're way overdue.
Yes, that's right.
For a front porch.
That's right. Yeah, they come and chill on our porch with us. Yeah, little front porch barbecue.
Many thanks to you and the brothers. God bless y'all.
All right. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Husbandry. We'll see you on the next episode. Good. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
That's the first one down. You got the special treatment. That felt like they told me it was 45 minutes. I felt like we were only 20 minutes in.
I know.
I was enjoying.
45 minutes?
That was 45.
It was 45.
Like 20 minutes ago.
Oh,
right?
Wow.